Thank you very much, Juan, for that presentation. And now we will continue with the next work session on engaging local communities and mainstreaming indigenous knowledge, moderated by Christopher Ballard, Associate Professor of Pacific History at the National University of Australia. And so we welcome the panelists. Satao Gakimoto, expert in natural resource management and indigenous peoples' rights, who will be with us online. Saima Iqbal, Senior Architect of Conservation, National Indian Foundation for Arts and Cultural Heritage, the Kashmir chapter, who will also be with us online. Rohit Jasu, Program Manager, Urban and Sustainable Built Heritage Conservation, Disaster Risk Management and Post-Crisis Recovery, ICROM, also with us online. And Awarete Kawadi, leader of surveillance of indigenous land in Timor, Brazil. And so Mr. Da Silva from Pantanal. And I understand that Satao is now connecting, and maybe in a few minutes he will be ready. So in the meantime, Christopher, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and welcome to this third session in our conference on engaging local communities and mainstreaming Indigenous knowledge. So placing Indigenous knowledge back at the heart of what we do, particularly when we work on Indigenous territories. And I'd just like to thank Juan Casanero again for a fantastic talk, which really sets the conditions. And it might sometimes seem a little bit obscure to be talking about cosmovision for fire managers, but until you grasp those basic elements, it's very difficult to understand what communities are talking about and how they approach things. So I'd like to greet our first speaker in this session, Awarete Kayabi. He's from the Kawaiwete or Kayabi community and lives in the village Kamasari in the Xingu Indigenous Park. It's the first legally protected indigenous territory in the world, and it's become the prototype of large indigenous territories throughout Amazonia. So Awarete Kayabi is now the coordinator of a surveillance program, very much like what Juan just described to us, which operates in the Xingu Indigenous Park. He has studied in law, administration, and finance. But currently he works at the Aretana Institute as a coordinator for the monitoring of the Xingu Indigenous Territory. And we're very lucky to have Nuno who was introduced to us yesterday to work with us in translating Awarete's presentation. So I think Awarete has a presentation to make first, and then we will have a conversation and discuss some of those points further.
Oi. Bom dia. Eu gostaria de saudar a todos, senhores e senhoras, e gostaria de fazer uma apresentação aqui. Eu sou o coordenador de monitoramento do território indígena Xingu, Mato Grosso, Brasil. E aí a gente tem um programa de monitoramento do Instituto Aretana, que eu gostaria de apresentar para vocês, os trabalhos que a gente tem executado, e também os desafios em relação aos projetos que afetam o nosso território. O território indígena Xingu, ou Parque Indígena do Xingu, foi criado em 1961. Em 1961, tem 2,7 milhões de hectares.
2.3 million hectares.
Está na zona de transição entre Planalto Central
It's in the central area and the Amazon forest. There are 16 peoples and there are different languages spoken, but basically they have to do with the Caribbean Arabic, Magroje.
A gente temos
People
alto, médio e
have
baixo Xingu. E
Shingle,
também o leste
lower,
Xingu, que é uma
middle, and
ATI
high.
que é
And
agregado
another one that is
ao
added
território indígena Xingu,
to the
demarcado
Xingu
após a demarcação do Parque Indígena do Xingu.
on part of the National Xingu Park.
A gente temos no Xingu, o
Here
Instituto
we
Aricano,
have
temos 4 bases de
4
monitoramento no Alto
monitoring
Xingu,
areas in the higher
Batuvi,
Xingu, Batuvi,
Curizevo,
Migurizevo,
Unuene e
Unuene,
Ucurumi.
and
No
Ukurumi.
médio, a gente
In the
temos
middle,
no PIV, Terra Nova, no
Bivi,
médio
Terra
Xingu.
Nova, in the middle
Baixo
Xingu,
Xingu,
and
a
in the
gente
lower
temos 3
Xingu, we have
bases
3
de
areas,
monitoramento,
monitoring
no
areas,
PIV Tuapé,
Tivituape,
PIV Manito e o PIV
Tivimanito,
Mosquito.
and Mosquito.
Esses 3 PIVs do Baixo Xingu,
These 3,
Tuapé, Manito e Mosquito,
Pevanito
a
and
gente
Mosquito,
considera como área de
people
conflito.
consider
O
them
nosso
to be as an
território
area of dispute
faz divisa
because the
com
territory
a fazenda dos fazendeiros.
is at war
Então, o
with
que faz
the
a
landowners,
divisa do nosso território é o
the
rio.
large landowners.
Portanto, não sabendo
So
de que lado está o rio,
we do,
existem invasões de pescadores
and so the
pesca
rivers
predatória, os caçadores
flows, and we don't know
que
if it's through
entram
one
dentro do nosso
side or
território
the
para
other.
pescar, matar jacaré,
And
capivara, entre outros animais.
Capabave and other animals are all there.
A gente temos também na
We
área
also have another
do
area,
Alto Xingu,
Alto Xingu,
no município de
in the
Querência,
municipality
a
of
gente temos
Querencia.
problema também com
We also
relação
have
ao
a
limite
problem
do
in
nosso território, a sobreposição
relation to the
da área do
overlapping
Curumim.
of the Kurumi
A gente
area.
temos ali,
Here
não
you
sei se
can
os
see it.
senhores e as senhoras
I don't
conseguem
know if you're
ver ali.
able to devise it,
Essa de amarelo aqui
but the one in
foi a primeira
yellow
proposta
was the first
para
proposal
que consertasse o
to
zigue-zague
agree on
que
a
tem dentro do território.
zigzag
Isso
area within the
dificulta o trabalho
territory,
de
which
monitoramento
hinders our
e
monitoring
também
and
as
also
atividades
the
de caçadores que entram
activities of
dentro do nosso
hunters
território.
that
A primeira
penetrate our
proposta
territory. So the
é
first
alinhar
proposal was to align.
daquele tamanho ali, não muito
Here,
extenso.
this is
A segunda proposta é aquela
not
outra ali, que
very
alinhava de uma
big,
área
but the
maior até
second
o território
proposal,
indígena Vali,
and the second
justamente
proposal
para
involved a
corrigir esse
greater
zigue-zague
amount of our territory,
que foi feito na demarcação de
and this was done in
1961.
1961.
Essa área que eu
Now,
falei,
this area that I
houve uma
mentioned earlier,
sobreposição na
there was
nossa
an
área, na região do
overlap
Curumim,
of our
município de
region
Querência,
and the municipality of
mais
Querencia,
ou menos
and more or less
259 metros
259
para dentro do nosso
meters
território.
inward within our
Lá tem
territory.
plantio de monocultura,
And so we
arroz,
have
milho, dentre outros.
subsistence crops,
Estavam
and
pavimentando
others, and
uma estrada
they were
do
also
município de
paving
Querência,
a road
onde foi
through the
tirado
municipality
a
of
pedra dentro do
Querencia,
nosso território também.
and this
Eu e
also
a minha
involved our
equipe
territory.
conseguimos
So with
embargar
my
a
team,
retirada
we were
de pedra
able
de
to
dentro do nosso
stop
território.
them advancing within our territory.
A gente temos uma imagem
And
ali,
we have an image
a
here
equipe do Instituto de
of
Monitoramento
the Monitoring Institute
fazendo
team
essas atividades.
carrying
dentro
out
da
these
nossa
activities within our reserve.
A placa da Fundação
The
Nacional dos
plate
Povos
of the
Indígenas,
National
a FUNAI,
Foundation of Indigenous
deveria
People,
estar nesse
FUNAI,
pontinho,
should be
esse
there
pontinho para cá.
in this little bridge
Mas
here,
tiraram
this
o
side.
marco da FUNAI
But
e não sei para onde mandaram.
they
Portanto, a área
broke it down, and
os
so the
fazendeiros falam que são
area
deles está
that
para lá,
the big
mas não é.
landowners
A
appears to
a
extend,
coordenada
but it
original é
isn't,
essa do primeiro ponto.
based
a
on
gente
this
temos,
first point that we have
as
marked out.
coordenadas
And so
originais
here we have the
que não
original coordinates
corresponde com o que os fazendeiros querem.
and what the big landowners want is inappropriate.
Esse é uma equipe
This is
do
the
Baixo
team
Xingu
in
e do
the
Alto
lower
Xingu,
Xingu
que
and the
trabalha
higher
com monitoramento
Xingu
do
that
território.
work, or upper Xingu,
Essa
that
primeira
works in our
foto, à minha
territory. This
direita
first
e à
picture to the
esquerda
right
dos senhores
and to your left
é uma equipe de
is a
monitoramento do Baixo
monitoring
Xingu.
team of Lower
Aquela outra
Xingu,
é outra
and the other
equipe
one is
do Alto
another
Xingu.
team in the Upper Xingu.
Essa queimada aí
Now here,
aconteceu este ano
this burn occurred
no
this year
Xingu.
in Xingu.
Foram mais ou menos
More or
dois
less
meses, se eu não me
2
engano,
months, if I remember
queimada
correctly, of a
dentro do nosso
burn
território.
within our territory.
Nessa primeira imagem,
This first
desse lado
image,
aqui,
this side here,
é uma queimada do Alto Xingu.
this was a
As
burn
nossas
in
casas,
the
no modo
Upper
geral,
Xingu area.
é feito
In
de
broad
palha.
terms, this
Então,
was, we
toda
work with
queimada é um
shovels.
perigo para
But
nossas residências.
all burns
tempo
of this
da
type
seca,
is a danger
as
to
casas
our
ficam muito seco por
homes
não
because
ganhar água
our
de chuva.
homes are very
Isso
near.
facilita a queimada de
And
nossas casas também.
this would also facilitate or make it easier for our homes to be burnt down as well.
Essa equipe aqui
Because this is not the
Baixo
rainy
Xingu,
season. And the other
houve uma
team here in the
queimada
Lower
onde
Xingu,
houve esse
there was a
paredão
burn
de fogo na
where you
beira do rio
see
Xingu.
here this wall of
A parte aí de
fire
cima
on the
que vocês
edge of the
avistam
Xingu
foi logo
area.
após a
And
queimada. Esse é um campo, não é
this
uma
is a
floresta
field. This was
alta.
not, no longer a forest.
Eu gostaria de
I would
relembrar
like
aqui para os
to
senhores e as
leave you
senhoras
here
sobre a
with
proteção
this
do nosso
image,
território
the protection of our
e que a gente
territory,
faz de tudo
and what we
para que
do a bit of
consiga
everything
manter as
in
nossas
order
florestas
to
em
keep
pé
our
e ter o
forests
controle do fogo.
and control
Eu coloquei
fire.
para os senhores e as
I have
senhoras
put this up for
a
you,
foto
a
de
picture
dois caciques do
of
Xingu
two Xingu
que
chiefs
lutam incansavelmente
who fight
para buscar
tirelessly
apoios
to look
financeiros
for
para
financial
subsidiar
support to
as atividades de
subsidize the
monitoramento
monitoring
dentro do nosso
activities
território.
within our territory.
Temos ali
We
o
have
cacique
here
Raoni
Chief Hali
e o cacique
and
Tapi Yawalapti,
Cacique Raoni
eles
and
somos postos
Chief
para proteger no nosso
Yai
estado, Mato Grosso,
Yalpiti
nosso território, Xingu,
for the Xingu
terra indígena
territory.
Capoto Jarina, terra indígena Megronotire e Baú. São esses
And
territórios
these are the
que
three
eles trabalham.
territories where they are actively working.
Não sei se os senhores
I don't
conhecem
know
esse
if you
animal.
know this animal
Esse
here.
tamanduá é o símbolo
This is a
do breve
tamanduá,
fogo
a
do
symbol
Brasil.
of the fire land in
A
Brazil.
gente captamos essa imagem
And
durante
we
uma
use
queimada
this
que
image
aconteceu,
with a
onde esse
burn that
tamanduá estava
occurred
fugindo do fogo.
and where everything was
Atravessamos o
full of
rio,
fire.
a gente
We
conseguimos
crossed the river
ajudar
and were
esse
able
animal
to
na
help
travessia do
this
rio
animal,
para que não morresse queimado.
to get them to cross the river so that they should not be burnt by the fire.
Esse é
Here
aquela
you
imagem
see
que
the
eu mostrei
image
anteriormente,
that I showed you
foi da
earlier,
queimada
where this is
aconteceu
the
lá no
area
Xingu.
where that was burnt in Xingu.
Eu gostaria de passar esse vídeo
Now
aqui,
I
vocês
would
dão
like
uma
to show
olhada.
you a video for you to take a look.
Pessoal, eu gostaria
I would
de
like
comentar pouco com relação
to
às
speak
imagens
a
colocadas
little
aqui
bit
nos
about
senhores
these images
sobre o
that I
cuidado
have
que a gente
just
tem com o
shared
território.
regarding
Com a mudança
how we need to
climática,
care for the
a gente
territory.
estamos
With
tendo
climate change,
dificuldade
we're having
de trabalhar com
difficulty
fogo.
in working with
O clima não
fire.
é o mesmo,
The
o
climate is not the
comportamento
same,
da chuva e do vento não é
and
a mesma
wind
coisa.
and rain does not
Um desmatamento
behave as before.
muda literalmente a
This
dinâmica
changes totally the dynamics of fire, wind, and everything, nature in
O que a
general.
gente tem
And so,
feito
what we
hoje,
have done
a gente
today,
planta, a gente faz roça, a gente planta
we
e logo a primeira, segunda,
plant,
terceira
and
chuva,
then with a
o final de
second or
agosto,
third rain
queimava-se as
in late
roças. Hoje a gente não
August, we
consegue
used
fazer
to
mais isso.
burn what was
Por
left of the
quê? Porque
crop. But
demora a
today we
chover.
cannot
Está
take
chovendo
that,
entre
you cannot do
setembro
that
e
anymore
outubro.
because it takes longer
Então,
to
se a
rain.
gente
It
começa a
rains from
queimar nossas
September to
roças
October.
no mês de
And so
agosto,
if we
o que a
begin the
gente
burn in
plantar
August,
provavelmente vai
we
morrer
will
tudo.
probably
Isso
kill everything
dificulta
off.
a
And
nossa
this
produção
means
de
that
alimentos no
our
Brasil.
food
E a gente tem
production
uns
is
cuidados
affected.
com o nosso
And
território,
we must
porque a gente
care
depende do
for our
território, da
territory because
floresta,
we
do rio para
depend
nossa
on the
subsistência.
territory, the forest, the river
Atualmente o Rio
for
Xingu
our
está secando,
subsistence. Everything
o
is
viveiro
drying
está ficando
out,
difícil,
and
a construção
everything is
de
difficult.
projetos
It's difficult to
de
carry out
hidrelétrica em
projects
torno do Xingu
and
está secando
internet
o rio também.
and
Os peixes
towers are
maiores
also drying the
estão
Xingu
morrendo
region
também porque o
out.
rio seca e não
And
tem
the
oxigênio
river
suficiente
is
para que elas
running
possam
low,
ficar
and there is
dentro de uma
insufficient
área mais profunda do
oxygen
rio.
in the water
Então
to
são
keep
vários
the fish
fatores
alive.
que
And so
envolvem
all these are factors that
a preocupação que a gente tem com o nosso território.
lead
Não
us
só
to be
isso, a gente
concerned with
temos
the
também
territory. And not only that,
alguns projetos
we also have
voltados para
projects
pesca esportiva dentro do nosso território também.
for
É uma
work
preocupação para
within
nós,
the
é um desafio que o
territory.
Instituto Aritana
But this is
tem
a matter of
com relação
concern.
a esses trabalhos, esses projetos
These
próprios,
different
alguns
projects
indígenas,
that
nosso território.
involve
A gente
certain
precisa conscientizar,
indigenous people
mostrar a
that are
importância
not that interested in the
de
territory.
preservar
What
os
we
peixes
need
do
is
nosso
to
território,
preserve
nossa
the
floresta.
species, our
O desafio
territory, and
maior
our forest.
também
Our
está
greatest
na
challenge
questão
is
da
also
evangelização que
related
atenta dentro do nosso território, que afeta
to the
diretamente nossas crenças
invasion
e
of
desacreditações,
other cultures in our territory and
nossa
that
religião.
tend to
Então,
modify
além
our customs and
trabalho de
views.
monitoramento do
So
nosso território,
we need
a
to
gente
monitor our
também
territory,
esse
and
desafio
also we
que a gente
face
vai
this other
se
challenge
organizando, se
that
adaptando
if we
para ver como é que a
adapt
gente
and
consegue
organize,
solucionar
maybe we will be able
essas
to resolve
problemáticas que
these
chegam dentro do nosso
issues
território.
that
É isso
affect
que eu
us in our
gostaria de passar pouco
territory.
para vocês.
And that is what I wanted to
Agradeço a
share with you,
oportunidade,
and I
a
thank you
equipe
for the
da Unesco,
opportunity, the
todos
UNESCO
aqui,
team, and everyone
e
here.
obrigado.
Thank you very much.
A very passionate and detailed account of the monitoring work in the Xingu Park. I think, if possible, I might ask a few questions, which Nuno will put to you, just to tease out some more of the detail. You talk about a range of different threats that you monitor. Fire is one of them. What is the range of other threats that the Xingu monitors keep an eye on?
Quais são as ameaças que vocês monitoram no Xingu? Quais são as ameaças? Devagar aí, vou traduzir.
Então, as ameaças que a gente monitoram no Xingu é extração de madeira.
What the Xingu
So
monitor is wood extraction.
threats that they monitoring is illegal deforesting,
Pescadores predatórios,
illegal fishing,
caçadores predatórios
illegal hunting,
e queimada.
and fire also.
So when you monitor fire, Is there coordination then with fire services? And when you monitor illegal hunting, is there coordination with government departments? How do you enforce, how do you impose sanctions on these external threats or address fires?
Quando vocês fazem monitoramento e detectam alguma ilegalidade, como é feita a articulação com os órgãos do governo, seja do fogo ou de caça?
A gente trabalha com monitoramento, a gente não faz a fiscalização. A fiscalização o Estado e seus organismos que faz. A gente manda relatório.
They do the monitoring, but the law enforcement is the government that do this.
A gente manda os relatórios para órgão indigenista, que é a FUNAI. O caminho é CR, Coordenação Regional Xingu, Canarana, e FUNAI Brasília.
They produce relatories, some summary with the monitoring, and give this to FUNAI, the organization that cares about the indigenous affairs.
A maior dificuldade que a gente tem é a dificuldade financeira. A FUNAI não tem capital para subsidiar as ações de fiscalização dentro do território. Essa é a maior dificuldade.
He said that FUNAI, this government institution, has only few resources to do all the necessary activities, so it's a difficulty that they have.
And in the case of fire, is there collaboration between the Xingu peoples and the fire services in the suppression of fire?
Para o combate de fogo, é feito pelo Prévio Fogo, junto com as organizações indígenas e com a FUNAI, como que é feito a parte de fogo.
O trabalho do Prévio Fogo é feito com o pessoal do Prévio Fogo, parceria com a FUNAI e organizações indígenas.
There is a organization from the government. This is Prévio Fogo. It belongs to the IBAMA, Brazilian Environment Institute, and this fire organization has they have people that do this fire control and prevention. They have staff from indigenous in the Xingu villages.
And if I can ask just one last question, what kinds of support, financial, moral, legal, would Xingu people want to combat fire in the future, and especially in the context of climate change?
Que tipo de financiamento as pessoas do Xingu precisam para fazer o combate ao incêndio? Ou que tipo de financiamento vocês têm também?
As comunidades, no modo geral, necessitam muito de materiais para combate ao fogo. Não é só a formação, a capacitação dos brigadistas indígenas ou não indígenas. É necessário aumento da equipe de brigadistas para combater o fogo, para fazer o trabalho de combate aos incêndios.
The indigenous villages in Xingu, they need more equipment and more formation of firefighters, and to have more capacity to do the work.
Precisa de recursos financeiros para compra de materiais, para que os brigadistas possam trabalhar. A gente já chegou a ajudar com alguns equipamentos que nós temos, só que não é só equipamento, equipamento fluvial que eu falo, transporte fluvial. Precisa de equipamento apropriado para o trabalho dos brigadistas. Para isso, a gente precisa de recurso. O Instituto Aritana, ano que vem,
he said they need more equipments. Even Aritana Institute gives some resource for the firefighters with transportation by the rivers also, but they need more.
o Instituto Aritana, a ATIX, Associação Terra Indígena Xingu, e Instituto Raoni, a gente conseguimos um apoio da França. A gente conseguimos um recurso da França, a gente estamos planejando para que ano que vem a ATIX, Instituto Aritana, Instituto Raoni, possa trabalhar com mais eficiência com a equipe do Preve Fogo.
So he said 3 indigenous institutions that works in Xingu, Aritana Institute, ATIX, and Instituto Raoni. They have finance from France government to improve these actions in fire control in Xingu.
Thank you very much indeed. That was a fantastic presentation, and thank you for the questions, and thank you, Nuno, as well, for your translation.
Ok, ele agradeceu pela conversa.
Obrigado.
So we have 2 other speakers joining us remotely. Can I just check that we have Saima Iqbal online? Saima, fantastic, and I can see Rohit as well. So I'll just introduce Saima briefly. Saima Iqbal is the Principal Conservation Architect at the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage. She's in the Kashmir chapter. She's an architect with a deep dedication to traditional building crafts, and has over 20 years of experience in historic conservation. That includes the restoration of Kashmir's 17th century Mughal gardens and several initiatives in remote and culturally rich regions of India. Saima has led projects supported by the Prince Claus Fund, the German Embassy, and the Aleph Foundation, and received major international grants such as the Gerda Henkel Stiftung grant for historic houses in Malabar and the Endangered Wooden Architecture Program for Kashmir's wooden kankas. Her award-winning restoration of Amar Singh College earned the UNESCO Asia-Pacific Award for Cultural Heritage Conservation in 2020. Currently, she's focused on enhancing disaster resilience for Kashmir's heritage sites and building international partnerships for conservation. Welcome, Saima. Do we have sound? Still no sound. No? Sorry, Saima, we still don't have sound for you. I'm not sure if it's a problem at our end or at yours. Is it a volume issue? Because I can hear. Sorry, we'll just resolve this, Saima, and then we'll start again. Switch to Rohit? Okay, all right. While we try and resolve that, let's move to our next speaker, Rohit Jigyasu. Rohit, do we have you online, and can we hear you? Yes, faintly, but we can hear you. Let me just introduce you briefly, Rohit. So Rohit Jigyasu is a conservation architect and risk management professional from India, currently working at ICROM as project manager on urban heritage, climate change, and disaster risk management. He's also at present the vice president of ICOMOS, International Scientific Committee of Risk Preparedness, or ICORP. Rohit served as the UNESCO chairholder professor at the Institute for Disaster Mitigation of Urban Cultural Heritage at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan, where he was instrumental in developing and teaching the very famous international training course on disaster risk management of cultural heritage. Before joining ICROM, Rohit had been working with several national and international organizations such as UNESCO, UNDRR, the Getty Conservation Institute, and the World Bank on consultancy, research, and training on DRM of cultural heritage. He's also the co-author of the revised draft of the UNESCO policy on climate action for World Heritage properties that's currently under discussion by the states parties of the World Heritage Convention. And if you haven't seen the draft of that, I'm sure you will before too long. Rohit, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Prepare my presentation just to make some key points. But before that, I would like to thank UNESCO office for really giving me this opportunity to participate in this important symposium. I'm sorry I cannot be there in person, but the digital technology really allows us to participate remotely as well. So I'm very happy to be able to do so. I'll just share my screen and just let me know if everything is clear at your end.
Yeah, all clear.
Okay, perfect. So this session is really
that looking at traditional knowledge and seeing how it can support fire risk reduction. And on that theme, I would like to start by saying that there is a lot of knowledge which really tells us how traditional communities or indigenous people have really managed disaster risks, and those include fire as well. I'm just going to share just a few examples to illustrate how this knowledge has been very helpful, not only in the past, but also continues to do so even today. So in Papua New Guinea, the Singas people use bamboo pipes to divert water from nearby streams and create sprinkler systems that can extinguish fire. They also have this knowledge of fire ecology and fire indicators that they have really developed on the basis of understanding the behavior of animals and plants that help them to predict and prepare for fire events. Another very interesting example is from Africa, where indigenous people of savanna regions have used fire as a means of land management, livelihood enhancement, and conflict resolution. So we also see that disaster risk reduction is not the only objective of traditional knowledge. We see that it actually is holistic in nature and can address many aspects together. So in this case, for example, land management, improving livelihood opportunities are all part of this knowledge system. Now, in this case, fire is also used to clear land for agriculture, improve the pasture quality, control pests and diseases, and maintain fire breaks. And also, fire has a role to play in intangible heritage as well, because it is symbolizing local power and identity. Well, I moved to Japan, where there has been a very interesting application of traditional knowledge in many ways. And here I'm just showing one example from Shiragawago village there, where the local community structure has been used very effectively for managing these water guns that are put in place. This traditional community structure actually is designed in a way that
community takes collective responsibility for monitoring whether there is a fire and also maintaining these fire guns. So it's also very interesting how the local social networks and religious institutions in many cases have a very effective role in terms of traditional management systems for emergency preparedness and response. Well, there are other ways in which we see that traditional knowledge can be very effective. For example, fire alarms, rather than having electronic systems in place, conch shells are being used in Bhutan,
which is a very local way of informing people of any emergency situation. Now, what we have to really understand is that this traditional knowledge system that has actually been very helpful is now facing threats. And we need to understand these threats, which are increasing vulnerability of communities to disasters. On one hand, we see that there is loss of local skills or human resources. There is also increased dependence due to lesser use of locally available resources. People are more and more dependent on outside support, and in that process, they lose the sustainability that this knowledge gives them. Also, sustainable livelihood sources such as land are now very much decreasing because it is either sold for development, and that also has a effect on this loss of knowledge. And the marginalized section of the community, in fact, are also having the challenge of not being able to afford some of the materials that have been very easily available as part of their traditional management and knowledge systems. So, for example, in many cases, we don't find bamboo very much available. And if we go and buy, they have to go and buy in the market, it's much more expensive than before. And in some instances, there is the issue of energy intensive, that the traditional knowledge is climatically not suitable because of high energy needs. So, I mean, these are some of those examples which we have to take into account to address the loss of traditional knowledge. Now, what I would like to advocate, I won't say much in detail, but what I would like to say is that it is very important that we integrate and adapt traditional knowledge by not categorizing it as a separate knowledge system, but combining traditional and scientific knowledge. And that also means that we need to recover scientific aspects of traditional knowledge on one hand, and on the other hand, we have to have traditional aspects of scientific knowledge. For example, traditional ways of communication can be used to effectively disseminate some of the lessons that we derive from scientific knowledge. We also need to think about workable alternatives for repair and retrofitting of traditional and historic structures, which may have got damaged but did not collapse. So, deciding these different options will be very important rather than going for standard engineering recipes and design packages. It is also necessary that we engage in a process of culturally sensitive reconstruction that builds on the accumulated knowledge of the past, fosters local identity, but at the same time addresses new needs and aspirations, including that of risk mitigation and adaptation to climatic variability. And last but not the least, it is necessary that we recognize cultural heritage as a source of resilience and develop innovative solutions that aim at adapting and utilizing traditional management systems and coping practices for disaster risk reduction and emergency preparedness and response. So, what does it mean? We have to move from just understanding what is traditional knowledge, but in fact, finding out how this knowledge can be applied in the contemporary context. There's enough research done which shows us what traditional knowledge is, but we still need to do a lot more work on innovation, on developing real tools which can be applied in practice. So this implies that research and practice have to go hand in hand. There's a lot of effort required for innovation in adapting traditional knowledge to the contemporary context. Just want to mention this initiative that ICRAM did with UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction 2 years ago at developing Words into Action guide for Sendai framework on using traditional knowledge for disaster risk reduction. We have actually called it traditional and indigenous knowledges because we need to recognize the knowledge of indigenous people separately, which we have really made an effort in this publication. And very recently, just 3 months ago, we have also launched a new website, which I'm just sharing the link here, TIKS for DRR.net, which is a repository of case studies which can be searched across various filters such as the location, the type of hazard, the which aspect of disaster risk management this knowledge is applicable, and which type of heritage it is referring to. So I would request you to all visit this website and you can actually access a lot of very interesting case studies on fire risk reduction as well. So I'll just conclude here and I look forward to our discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Rohit. Please stay with us, as I'm sure there will be questions which we'll take as a group. Do we have Saima with sound? We have Saima with sound. Fantastic. Saima. Please go ahead. Oh, we don't have Saima with sound. Sorry. No, still no sound. Not at this end, anyway. Bear with us for a minute, Saima, and we'll see if we can resolve it. So do please prepare questions for our speakers. We will have time for some question and answers. And I'm sure that you have things that you want to raise with all three.
Okay, am I audible now?
You are.
Thank you. Wonderful. It had connected you to some other microphone without my knowledge. Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I think on this note, without wasting much time, I'll share my presentation. Okay. Now, where is the screen? Which presentation is it going to save? Later. Share my presentation. Where am I now? Where is my presentation? It is here. Right. Okay, now, thank you very much for having me. I do hope that you all are enjoying the conference as much as I am. And I really have to thank UNESCO for inviting me to share my experiences within my context of Kashmir, which is a multi-hazard zone region. And I also want to say that I'm very happy to share the stage with Rohit, who has taught me everything I know about disasters and hazards. Now, before I begin a little bit of fire risks in Kashmir, I want to begin by actually explaining about the context of how we are sat geologically. Now, geologically, Kashmir is located in an alpine orogenic belt, which makes it highly prone to seismic activities, just like many other regions of this belt are, like Turkey, Gilgit-Baltistan, Himachal, Uttarakhand. Now, this region, all the cultural traditions of this region have adapted sort of to respond to earthquakes by integrating a lot of timber into their build fabric. And if you see here in all these images, these are different regions, but in one or another way, they have similar systems of integration of timber within the fabric of their building. Now, this integration of timber within the fabric of their building, on the one hand, makes it extremely resilient to earthquakes, but on the other hand, it simply makes it very prone to fires, the hazard of fire. In Kashmir, we have 2 or 3 types of very typical typologies of architectural construction. One is the Tak construction, which UNESCO has done an elaborate manual with Randolph Langenbach. The other one is the Taji Diwari system, and third one is the Thakkar. Now, Tak system is used in most of the domestic architectural typologies in Kashmir. Again, it uses timber at various horizontal levels, such as the floor level, the sill level, the roof level, the window levels, just to lace the building with a lot of timber, so that the building, in the event of an earthquake, it doesn't collapse. Timber being very flexible and very good at dissipating seismic energy. Again, too much timber makes the building vulnerable. And I would say Kashmir's cultural heritage consists of timber. Almost, 80 to 90% of Kashmir's traditional builds are using timber in one or another form. Then, apart from Tak and the Jitiwari system, which I'm not going to talk about for lack of time, we have another very, very interesting system which is prevalent not just in Kashmir but in Greater Kashmir, if we have to include Gilgit-Baltistan area also in this. And this is called locally called Thatar, but technically it's called Ketak Ribbit. And this kind of construction is known to be extremely resilient to earthquakes and even ballistic impacts. But the whole problem is that too much timber again. It is actually considered to be one of the most sophisticated types of construction using timber. And in such buildings which require a lot of volume without having to introduce a horizontal diaphragm to sort of dissipate the energy, the seismic energies, generally this kind of construction was used. So for soaring khankas or spiritual hospices, forts, and even very tall palaces, this kind of construction was used. But the whole problem was that more than 85% of the building was constructed with wood, increasing the risk of fire, but also ensuring resilience against very enormous seismic impacts. Now, here I have sort of a collage of different typologies of architectural heritage that is available in Kashmir. And as you can see, these are all different. Their typologies, the characteristics are all in one or another way different, but the commonality in all these buildings is that they've used a lot of timber. So, the presence of timber in the historic builds or traditional builds of Kashmir makes it very, very prone to fire, and also the fact that the settlements in Kashmir are very tightly are very tightly built. They are very close to each other. So one incident of fire in one house creates a very kind of a replicating effect and compounds the impacts of fire. This image is from a very recent fire that we had about 2 weeks ago in a remote village near Gurez. Now, Gurez is really known for its timber architectural heritage. And that entire little small part of the village, which included 94 houses, about 20 shops, and God knows what, many trees, a lot of livestock, was completely annihilated in this fire. Now, this is a sort of a drone image from that village, and these are some images when the fire was taking place. Normally, fires occur in Kashmir during the winter months or during autumns when the need for warmth is more. So what happens is they use their traditional systems of heating, such as wood furnace. They would use electrical heater. They would use gas heaters. So sometimes there would be an explosion of a gas cylinder and it would the house would catch fire. The electrical heaters would have a short circuit. It would cause fire. Apart from all these reasons, there is another reason which is a very grave concern for causing fires, and that the faulty electrical system, which is really impacting our cultural heritage very badly. We see it in front of our eyes, but we can't do anything about it till a real systematic approach is taken. Now, this is an image of a 17th century religious Sufi shrine, which was gutted in 2012. This is called the Gir Saab. And the reason was, a very carelessly sort of installed wiring system, which caused an short circuit in the roof. The roof consists of timber, massive trusses, massive wood, and the extremely dry quality of that wood actually increases chances of catching fire. Apart from short-circuiting gas cylinders, furnaces and traditional kangris that we have. These are little fire pots that people use to heat themselves, to warm themselves. We also have armed insurgency, which causes such events. Now, this is the image from 1995, where we lost one of the very important monumental cultural heritages in Kashmir, which was called the Srar Sharif, and it belonged to the patron saint of Kashmir. Now, the massive scale of this fire actually destroyed about 300, more than 300 houses and displaced about 400 families. And as you can see in the background, nothing is left of the village. And armed insurgency in the sense that in 1995, the conflict of Kashmir was really high, and some militants had taken refuge in this cultural site. And to sort of smoke them out, the government forces had to literally burn the structure. Now, apart from many other hazards, Kashmir is also low-lying, and it has only one source of drainage, that is the river Jhelum that you can see on the right. And there is no other way that water, which is accumulated from glacial melt-offs or heavy rainfall, drains from the city or from Kashmir Valley itself. So that these multiple, hazards that Kashmir always faces has made the region a multi-hazard prone region with natural hazards like earthquakes, floods, landslides, avalanches, high velocity winds, snowstorms, road accidents, fires, etc. We have these occurring every other year. In fact, Kashmir is so vulnerable to these, fire episodes that more than 1,000 fire incidents have been recorded over the last 2 centuries in Kashmir. And these fires have actually ravaged and completely destroyed large portions of neighborhoods, very important landmarks. Now, this is one of the case studies that I'm carrying out in one of the shrines in Kashmir. And as I mentioned before, this is also constructed using the cater and privilege construction. And in this construction, we see that more than 80% of the building uses timber in its construction. The truss, if you can see, these are the walls constructed entirely in wooden blocks. The wooden framework that gets created then consequently gets filled with either rubble or mud. And then the roof truss is also extremely vulnerable to fire. Now, this is one of the projects that I'm voluntarily doing with the support of the local custodians there, which we call the Intizamiya Committee, and young architects and local volunteers to understand basic fabric. It is part of a bigger project that I'm doing, but I'm thinking that because the custodians of this property are very proactive, it will be one of the first sort of prototypes to understand a cultural landmark site which can have a sort of a disaster management plan, a larger disaster management plan with special focus on fire. During interviews and site assessments, we've realized that more than 85% of the building is constructed in wood. They have very faulty wiring system. The wood, because of the climatic, sort of the changing climatic patterns, has caused very long dry spells, and the wood that we see currently, especially in the truss system, is very dry. They don't have any fire protection or fire prevention measures in the sort of the roof truss that can, at least slow down the process of fire. Apart from that, we see that the electrical wiring is all over the place. It doesn't have a proper, system. There isn't a system in place, but in a way, the custodians of the property have made sure that they prevent any incident of fire from happening. So their mitigation systems are pretty good. Like, for example, this particular khanka remains closed for for the entire week. They only open it for the Friday prayers. And Friday prayers, as many of you may know, are congregational prayers, which the entire, the entire neighborhood comes and prays there. So they don't allow this shrine or khanka to be used on any other days. Besides this, because the vulnerability of fire is very high, they don't allow any inflammable or combustible material inside the khanka. So there is a proper watch and ward to check, to monitor people entering into the khanka too, and they are literally checked if they have any cigarettes, they have any matchboxes, candles. They are confiscated at the entrance and then later on given to them. Also, the community living around this property is very proactive. They are very spiritually inclined, but they don't understand really the dangers or the risks, the hazards that that this cultural site may be facing, or the slow aging process, the slow drying up of wood with, we don't have any data for the kind of humidity levels that exist inside or outside the building. There is no data available. But they are very proactive. And what I found out was that women are very interested. The younger generation is also very interested, but there is still, the gender equity that we talk about in all other aspects of, the UN sustainable goals doesn't exist, because these are religious sites and women are just not allowed to access these sites. So that makes, assessment for people like me also very difficult, because I'm a practitioner. I need to access all the spaces within the building to understand how the spaces behave and what is where, which is more priority, which is a better priority, which area we need to give better priority to, and so on and so forth. But women are not allowed inside the khanka. So that kind of a thing is something that we need to consider. So this is some of the pictures where we're engaging with a local community around the Khanka, and we have taken a series of interviews as to understand what their attitude towards this Khanka is. They've come up with a lot of ideas. The understanding of the Khanka, its historicity, its spiritual value, its architectural value is very high. But when it comes to disasters, they don't understand it much. The only thing that they go back to is the floods, because their recent memory of the 2014 floods is very recent. They have never experienced an earthquake impacting this Khanka, and an incident of fire has never occurred. So for them, it is really not, these disasters or these risks are not really very, prominent. So you have to really coax them to participate in our questions and in our community engagement processes. So this entire exercise has actually led us to understand that the longer, warmer, and dry climatic cycles are drying up the wood with unchecked humidity levels. Women, as I mentioned, who can be the first responders, especially the stay-at-home women, in case of an imminent fire, are not allowed in the khanka. And I am talking about khankas because this is my particular case. Inappropriate and hazardous electrical wiring is a big risk. Then the sanctified character of the heritage, general heritage. If you have a religious heritage, which in our case, monumental heritage really is very religious in nature, often limits documentation, risk assessments, or free or inclusive access. Then involvement of local communities is minimal. Custodians, however, are proactive in preventing causes of fire. Painted decorative woodwork, which actually exists in all the interiors of these khangas, it additionally adds to the risk of an imminent fire. Then another risk posed is by the tightly built character of the neighborhoods. And there is a constant dread of a conflict-related arson. So actually, I will now close this presentation and would like to share some of the, systems of mitigating fire, which people have used traditionally. So I need to really point out one thing here, that rural community is more proactive in terms of dealing with a disaster rather than the urban population is, because their memory of dealing with traditional knowledge has really diminished. They are contemporizing the way they are living, the way they are building their houses. Everything is now, there is a shift from traditional to, I don't know if you call it modern or whatever. But an interesting architectural feature of these traditional builds was the use of mud flooring over wooden floor planks and also earthen covering over roofs that helped in localizing the spread of fire. More technically, it compartmentalized spaces. So mud plaster on walls, it slowed down the spread of fire. In winters in Kashmir, when the fire risk from indoor heating was high, some traditional households, they would use water-soaked mats placed near cooking hearths to prevent sparks from spreading and flammable materials. This practice acted as a localized fire containment measure. And because Kashmir houses always have a hammam or a kitchen which has a hearth, this kind of a system was really, really useful. Then rural Kashmir, where most of the traditional knowledge rests, it still practices drying and storing of firewood on tree branches, a system which is locally called panbach, which actually prevented the likelihood of a fire if the same firewood was stored or stacked on ground. So they would use these mechanisms just to prevent an episode of fire from happening. And with this, I'd like to end my presentation and open for question answers and more discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm so sorry, my video was off the whole time. I didn't realize that. Nobody even pointed that out to me.
Sorry, Saima, and thank you very much. I think your passion for the topic comes through very clearly. So we have a bit of time for questions and answers, I think for the three panelists, and perhaps also for Juan as well, who we didn't get to put questions to. Questions and answers, questions from anyone in the audience?
I think there was one question which was posed by one of the colleagues at UNESCO, and it was how local knowledge can be integrated in the larger disaster management frameworks. I think if Rohit would like to start by commenting on that, if nobody else is asking any questions.
We do have some
Saima,
questions.
You can go ahead and then I will add. Please go ahead.
Yeah, we do have some questions from the audience. People are queuing up to ask, so please go ahead.
Hola, buen día.
Hello, good morning. I'm an architect from the municipality of Valparaíso. We have realized now that the main problem that we have in the city and in the region is environmental. It is not fully urban. And here you have presented some cases where from a rural area there is an involvement of communities and its importance as a change, as a positive change, both for the prevention and mitigation of fires, the different types of fires. Valparaíso specifically has a semi-rural context, and many woods or forests that are in constant danger. That's why I'm asking you about the involvement of communities, rural communities or communities located in the forest. And I would like to know if you can share any experiences from semi-urban or semi-rural areas, those transition areas, where it is important for a change to take place, because cities are constantly expanding, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. I'll just respond. I can think of an example from India.
From Ahmedabad, where it has been very interesting phenomena that the local communities not only include those who are been living there for generations, but even those who have migrated to the city have come together and have utilized their traditional networks, which are centered around religious institutions, and created a very interesting uh, collective response mechanism to address disasters. So, not relying on the institutional systems, but really trying to build something internally among the community, which means that yes, of course, rural communities are much more cohesive, are much more collectively, working together. But there are initiatives where local NGOs, local organizations can, in fact, engage even those who are not part of the city over generations and make them part of this collective initiative. Of course, the local social and religious institutions sometimes play a very important role in being those anchors who can bring these communities, which are diverse, together around common issues of, let's say, disaster response. So, I mean, I can think of this one example, but I'm sure there are many other examples where we have to realize that communities cannot be just coherent, or there is a lot of migration happening. People are moving in and out of rural and urban areas, and therefore, what we really need to do is to use some of these traditional management systems and knowledge systems and try and see how we can adapt them to this changing reality. We should not be romantic about traditional knowledge. I think this is very important for us to keep in mind. It has to be very much, let's say, evolved, considering the new dynamics in whether it is rural areas or urban areas or fringe areas.
Thank you, Rohit. Was there another question in the middle?
I'd also like to add to Rohit's comment. Actually, in Kashmir, we had more events of flood than fire. Fires are because they're very localized, they're sporadic, they impact smaller areas rather than earthquakes and floods, which impact the entire region. We had traditional early warning systems. Traditionally, people relied on a very tightly knit network, which still exists, but the suburban areas are really lacking that kind of a close knit network now. As an early warning system in the event of either a fire or a sort of an earthquake or a flood. So neighbors would alert each other using very loud calls or drum beats. That happens even now, or announcements from mosques, loudspeakers, which helped everyone to mobilize very quickly and put out a fire before it even spread. And I've seen it. I mean, a similar incident happened when I was traveling in one of the rural areas, and I really saw this happening right in front of my eyes. It was, as you said, it was a sub-rural, it was a peripheral urban region. Now, this communal vigilance and immediate response approach, it really remains very effective even today. And in rural and semi-urban areas where we don't have any formal firefighting systems or services available, or it takes the fighting services a very long time to reach the site, this really helps us buy time to sort of, control the fire.
Thank you, Saima.
I have a question. How does information, prevention, and actions get to rural communities in their own languages or dialects to call them through guidelines, pamphlets, or any other type of information whenever there is a disaster? Is that information available to them?
Can we put that question to Awarate first?
Dentro do nosso território, são 16 povos. Cada povo tem a sua língua, fala a sua língua. Cultura diferente, educação, filosofia, tudo diferente.
Everything is different. They have a different language, philosophy. And talking about your question, regarding any type of written information. We do not have that. I don't know that at least our community, I don't know how it is in other indigenous communities. They communicate orally mostly. That is how they usually communicate. And up to now, we do not have such a means of communication. We do not have any written information to provide them.
Thank you. Rohit or Saima, any response on that?
I just want to say that this is a very important question. In fact, this is a challenge. Risk communication needs to be really there in local languages. Let's face the fact, a lot of literature, a lot of work that has been done is in very limited language. I mean, it is not really translated into all those different languages that will enable them to reach the diverse communities that need to benefit from them. So we need to do a lot of work there. I think one of the challenge here is also vocabulary, because a lot of vocabulary that we use is very much centered around the main languages, let's say English or French uh, or Spanish. But I think it is also very important that these concepts are more not just taken literally, but are really understood in local, not only in local language, but also in the local, they should be translated into something which is locally understandable. We don't need to really be bogged down with these terms or terminologies, because sometimes they just don't make sense in another language. So a lot of work needs to be done in this area, and this is something that I think there's a gap, and we have to fill that.
Thank you, Roman.
I think I'll only add to that and say that this is where your local NGOs and volunteers come into action. So there needs to be a lot of one-on-one dialogue. I feel every government, every state has its own guidelines. They have their international guidelines, ICROM, ICOMOS, and UNESCO Prepare. Then they have their local guidelines. But in my experience, they sit in their libraries. The guidelines, the protocols need to go ultimately to the people who are going to use them. And this is where, volunteers, NGOs, they should take a proactive role in sort of, breaking down the jargon, the technical jargon into simpler terms, making it very layman friendly, and showing them through hands-on, techniques as to how a certain thing should be done. And there has to be a lot of engagement rather than us telling them how to do things. We must ask them how they should do it. So that exchange and that respect of the knowledge that they possess should also be paramount. I think that is very, very important, that the knowledge that they have is respected. And rather than we telling them, we must be brave enough to listen to what they have to say.
Hola. Muchas gracias a todos los expositores.
Hello, thank you very much for all the presentations. My name is Priscila Barahona. I work in the National Service of Cultural Heritage in Chile. I am here representing that institution of the Ministry of Culture. And I would like to ask you about your corresponding countries and your own contacts. How do you articulate the different institutions to prevent the risk of fires? In Chile, the situation is that we arrive late. Whenever there is a fire, we have a policy for cultural heritage. We are more reactive, as it is usually the case. We have many policies in place for earthquakes, which is a common thing here. However, for fires, we always arrive late. The electrical issue has zero priority. There is an identity issue. Many times communities do not value the buildings as they should. And I want to know about the articulation that we have. We have the public ministries, the service of national monuments, but we lack this articulation. How is your experience in terms of arriving to the situation on time, and how have you addressed prevention?
Okay, I just make I think this is a challenge not only in your country, it's a challenge almost everywhere.
Biggest problem is that heritage and managers and those who are responsible for civic defense, I mean, including firefighters or fire office, there's very little coordination before a disaster happens. So all that happens is that when there is some emergency, nobody, even the fire officers, haven't even visited some of the museums or heritage sites before. They don't even know where to access, where to get water that is necessary. So all this could be solved if there is a better communication before a disaster takes place. So this issue can be only solved, and I think there has been some work done, and I would here mention Japan because that's where they have really advanced in this area. That fire risk reduction is not something that is left for a disaster to happen, but there's a lot of communication. In fact, there's a division on cultural heritage within the fire office in Kyoto, for example. So we have to learn from these examples, and we need to have a better communication. I would always say that you can invite a fire, if you are a manager of a heritage institution, you should invite a fire officer, maybe for a cup of tea or some snacks in advance, have a little bit of understanding of each other, take them around your institution, show them where are the access points, where is the source of water, so that they are better prepared. And maybe they can also train you as your own staff to be better able to respond and prepare yourself. So a lot of work is required. There are some good examples, but a lot more needs to be done. So you don't feel that you are the only place or country where this is the issue. This is the issue everywhere, and there are a couple of good practices now available, but we need to do much more. That's what I will say.
Thank you, Rohit. Two more questions.
Hola, buenos días.
Good morning. I'm Javiera Contreras, architect for the Corporation of the Valparaiso World Heritage. Very interesting presentations today, and I wanted to highlight the constructive culture that is being relayed here with Simon's presentation. It has wood. The topography is complex, a seismic country, and these conditions are repeated here in Valparaiso, conditions that have meant that the constructive culture as such, it is in itself resilient. It has survived many catastrophes, and I'd like to highlight the role of wood in this architecture, which is also dense. We see that there are dwellings in the hills that are made of the same material. So this also leads us to the challenge of combining traditional knowledge with modern scientific knowledge. And what do you see as the references that you could maybe point out to innovate in our constructive methods without ignoring the traditional knowledge and what they represent, because they too are part of the heritage?
Who wants to take that question? Please do.
Local research as to how can we have alternate materials and techniques using without ignoring the traditional techniques. So like we have the Judiwari, we have the tak based, and we have the Thatar. Thatar is not used anymore. We don't have so wood to build such a structure. Such structures are not going to be built ever anytime soon. But Tak and Daji Diwali, the two very important systems, Daji Diwali is really a timber framing system which is used worldwide. Even Tak is in one or another way. So alternate building materials which are resistant to fire, erosion, wood rot, composite materials. All these materials we really need to scientifically sort of understand and adapt The techniques, the technology of construction can be the same, but they can be more robust to face hazards such as fires, floods. And so even, like I just mentioned, that mud plastered walls, they helped in compartmentalizing or containing fire in a certain specific room because earth was very resilient. But then that same mud plaster just gives in to floods. So we have such a complicated situation. So when you have a flood, the same mud plaster, it succumbs and the entire building collapses. So these alternate methods, we are coming up with these composite hempcretes. We are coming up with different types of steels, which look like timber but are sort of resilient to both floods, to water ingress, to earthquakes and fires. So this is, I think, adapting materials to meet modern needs really needs to be done, and we are coming up with manuals which teach us how to retrofit old buildings using contemporary techniques without sort of destroying the character and the integrity of the building. Rohit.
You answered it very well. There's nothing more to add, just to say that we also need to sometimes look for replacement of traditional materials which are no longer economically affordable. You may have bamboo as a traditional material or a certain kind of plaster, but it may not be available anymore, or it might be very expensive. So we have to sometimes even look for alternate solutions, considering the economic dimension too. So environmental, economic, social, all these dimensions have to be considered to find solutions that are relevant for today.
One last question.
Gracias.
Thank you. Ramiro Claro, director of the Alquim National Park in Bolivia. Aside from being a query, I would also like to add an opinion. The engagement of indigenous communities in the prevention, monitoring, and control of wildfires. The Narquén Mercado Park has an area of 1,600,000 hectares to the north east of Santa Cruz, and we border with our neighboring country, Brazil. And we have Amazon systems, hills, and Chiquitano. And so I greatly appreciate participation by the indigenous communities. For us, this is so relevant that we call it, they are the guardians of these protected areas. I understand that yesterday the speaker mentioned that in Argentina it is possible that the communities are not necessarily taken into account, and what they say is not necessarily true. Well, the firefighters are very trained, but we ensure that environmentalist organizations, their work may train community firefighters, and not just train them, but also provide them with equipment so that they are engaged in activity and support what is done more institutionally in the prevention and control of wildfires. This is so irrelevant on account of their knowledge of the territory, their ability to adapt to the area, and because of the places where they live. Because we lived at a great distance. The urban centers are far from the voluntary firefighters or the army. They're all part of the action. And so, any brigade, we ensure that it entails a park guard, volunteers, community volunteers, volunteer firefighters, and members of the army. And that is why this year we've had significant success in controlling, especially the wildfires. And the truth is that control or combating fires is a task for everyone. Everyone's engagement will ensure success. Resources are never sufficient when you have large wildfires, really large. And that is why we ask the national government to be part, also the department government, the municipal government, and the park, GAS, indigenous communities, our environmentalist institutions, people who are good-hearted. And in this way, it is possible to face a situation such as that, a natural disaster. And all of this, we appreciate it. And when you need air intervention by air, you need to coordinate this with the national government, because it's their decision. It's at that level that those decisions are made. And so we also know this very well. And so, in this scenario that we have today, and today with the UNESCO, it is very important that we be able to coordinate activities among countries, because fire is somehow originated not only by indigenous people, but everyone, and even from across the border. So today we're doing everything necessary to reach and achieve bilateral agreements. We have a river called Maitenes that is about 200 meters wide, and the fire, with the help of the wind, crosses the river, and it's not easy to control when you have a high canopy forest. And when the fire needs to travel, it goes below 30 to 40 meters. It can travel underground. And so I believe that we need to call on all our authorities. And I think that this is an expression for the entire world. We cannot continue with that logic of saying that we must ensure the food security and destroy our forests. No, on the contrary, we need to preserve them, because forests are life. And that is how we see them, we the indigenous people. And with our indigenous communities, those that live off natural resources, you cannot burn down the supermarket. This is the supermarket of the indigenous people. Food for indigenous people lie in the natural resources that they have. And so today I greatly appreciate and value the presentation by Ronald and Nuno, all here in person. And I believe it would be a model to be considered for the preservation of our cultural and natural heritage. And this park is in this category.
Thank you for that intervention, which is, I think, a really fine and appropriate way to end this session. I'd really like to thank all three of our presenters for stimulating presentations and a really engaged response to the questions. So a fantastic session. Thank you very much. And now I've got the happy task of announcing it's time for coffee.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos nuestros panelistas,
So we
especialmente
thank all our speakers and moderator Christopher, and invite you to break for coffee, and we meet back here at 12 noon. Thank you.